Hello everyone. I know it's a bit noisy out here, but I wanted to bring you out and show you one of my garden beds and what is happening with my radishes. So the weather's about to turn really warm here this week, and my radishes have kind of gotten away on me, and I know that after this hot spell they're going to bolt. So I'm going to be pulling radishes and bringing them in the house, and I'm going to be showing you how to cook radishes. Now, lots of people use radishes as a garnish or a part of a side, but we use them for a main side dish because we cook them, and I am excited to share that process with you. So hang on, I'll meet you inside. So here I am back in the house, and I have quite the mess of radishes. I threw out a couple that had gotten so big they were kind of woody and tough, and when I tried to slice them, they had little fibers that sticked, and little fibers that stuck out, and you know that they're going to be hard to cook or consume. So what I wanted to talk to you about today was actually cooking the radishes. Lots of people use radishes just as a garnish or to add a bit of flavor to a salad, but we generally don't eat them that way. I should say I love them that way, but my husband doesn't care for them that way. So we had to find some different ways to appreciate radishes. And so I started to do a bit of research, and then my friend Cindy come along and she said, oh yeah, you can just cook them like you would a potato, and they're quite delicious, and it takes the peppery part away, which is what most people would find offensive. So I started to do some research, and now we eat radishes in several different ways. I apologize, I'm still in my garden clothes, but while the radishes are fresh, I want to get this done because it's good to use the freshest ingredients. So I'm going to do 3 different recipes today, and just to give you an idea of the various things that we can do with radishes. So I am going to slice radishes up and make radish chips. Yeah, that's kind of a different sounding dish for sure. So I'm just using my big knife, and I'm just slicing these ever so thinly. Now, I bet you could do this in a food processor, but it's amazing how many chips one large radish will be able to produce. So I think with what I have here and what I've already sliced in the bowl, I probably have enough to cover the cookie sheet. So let's see. I have my oven preheated to 425 degrees, and this process takes, well, you kind of have to keep an eye on it, but it can take up to 25 minutes. So don't be disappointed or don't give up too soon if you feel like that they're not getting ready, because it does take a little bit of time. I would start testing them probably about the 15-minute mark, and I'm just kind of eyeballing these things. I'm going to add to my chips today a bit of dill weed, a bit of garlic powder, and some onion powder, as well as a bit of salt, which I'm going to reach for. Now I'm going to add kosher salt. I'm going to add probably about 1/4 of a teaspoon of kosher salt to this. It might be a little more, but not much more. And I am just going to work this to make sure that the chips are mostly coated with the olive oil and the spices. And a good reason to add what would seem to be way too many spices to the mix is that a lot of it gets left inside the bowl. Also, you have to work them a bit because they tend to stick together, and then you're only getting one side covered. So I am ready to lay these out on a baking tray, and you don't want them to overlap each other, because then you would lose the crispiness. And I think I have in this bowl 5 large radishes, to give you an idea what the volume of this is. Now, radishes are really good for us too, which is something, because we've always thought of it as a garnish. It's almost like it didn't matter whether it had nutritional value or not. But radishes are high in vitamin C. They contain antioxidants. They can definitely help us to flourish. But again, if it's not something that you care to eat raw as a raw vegetable, then we're losing out on that nutrition. Oops. So we're going to have almost the right amount. There's some of these that the knife slipped a little, or they're a little thick, so I'm going to set them out, because if they get too thick, then they don't cook evenly, and that's really what you want to have happen. Oh, it's a little thick, but I'm going to put it in there anyway. Now, from the time I put these radishes in the ground until today, how many days have elapsed? 10, so about 24 days have elapsed. And if you remember how big the tops were, they were this tall. They were really tall. So radishes are also traditionally one of the first vegetables out of the garden that we can eat in the spring. So it's nice to be able to do some things with them besides just eat them as a peppery little garnish. So now I have the oven set at 425 degrees, and I'm going to pop this tray in there. I will set a timer because it's easy to lose track of the time, and I'll set it for 15 minutes so that I can check them at that point, and then I'll move on to the next recipe. So hang in there. So I hope that you can ignore the lawnmower in the background. My neighbor has decided to pick right now to mow the lawn. So I'm going to take these little radishes, and some of them are a different size than others. So what I might do right off the bat is just to try and separate them somewhat, because the cooking time does vary, you know, if you have different sizes. So I'll put the bigger ones kind of together and give you an idea what it is I'm doing here. Whoops, bigger. Okay, so one of the really delicious ways to have radishes is just to cut them up and and boil them in water as you would, say, a small turnip or a potato. Think of these as baby potatoes. And some of these, I'm going to cut them all in half, and I'm just going to add them to a cooking pot. And this doesn't take long. The longest part might have been washing them outside before I brought them into the house and taking the tops and the tails off. Now, any of them that feel a bit tough when I'm trying to cut into them, I just throw them out, because that you know they're going to be tough. But these so far all seem really good. So I've got them in time before they had a chance to get too old. It's amazing what you can grow in a tiny little plot of land. So I've got enough in here to cover the bottom of the pot, and I'm going to cover these with about, you know, maybe an inch water over top of them, but not too much water. I know you can't see that, but they'll just be covered with about some of the bigger ones may still bob out of the water a little bit. I am going to add a little bit of salt to them. Again, that's probably around 1/4 teaspoon, and I'm going to put these on the stove to boil. And when you boil them, or when you cook a radish, it removes all of, I know it's hard to imagine, but it removes that peppery taste. Now, I think using radishes in your cooking became kind of vogue when people started keto diets, maybe, because radishes are quite low in carbohydrates. Although I'm sure there's lots of people who used them well before the keto diet became a thing. They may have cooked them back then even, but it's only in recent years that I have been introduced to cooking radishes, so I couldn't tell you how long that has been around. So I'm just going to cut these, and I'm going to, ooh, that one sounded a little hard. I probably have enough anyway. And then I'm going to put them back in the bowl. I'm going to put them into a bowl, and these ones we're going to roast. So I'm going to add about 1 tablespoon of olive oil. And if I were cooking this as a side dish, rather than just to show you how this is done, I would probably add a few more because they just shrink some. In fact, I'm going to add a few more. No, maybe not. I really don't have enough larger ones, and it's better if they're all cooking at the same temperature. So I'm going to add a little bit of salt to this mix, and then I'm going to add some, what's it called? Herbes de Provence. I'm probably not saying that correctly, but this mix, which I think came from Pampered Chef, yes it did, contains thyme, basil, fennel seed, savory, rosemary, tarragon, marjoram, and lavender, and it's gluten-free. So I'm just going to add that to it. You could add whatever spices you might like. I may also at some point add a little crushed garlic to it, but not today. So then I'm going to put them all down, facing down on a baking sheet. Actually, maybe I'll face them all up. No, let's face them down. I'm going to put them all face down on a baking sheet, and they cook at 425 degrees on a rack in the oven. As you would any roasted vegetable, you have to keep an eye on them, and you want to cook them till they're fork tender. Now, I can give you an estimated amount of time. It would be about the same as if you were making the chips, which is about 25 minutes to be fully cooked, but it depends on how much water is in the radish. It depends on whether or not anything else is in the oven. It depends on a number of things. So the idea is that these would be fork tender, and they make delicious roasted vegetables, and you could definitely add them to other roasted vegetables that take about the same amount of time to cook. Now, I hear the ones in the pot on the stove boiling, and I'm going to let those boil very vigorously, and that's why I don't put more water over top of them, because I want them to almost be done with the water. And then I'm going to add some butter to the pot and also some chopped garlic. So I'll be back in a moment. I wish you could smell it here at my house. I've added some butter to the pot, and then I used my microplane and I planed in some garlic, some fresh garlic, and just let everything come together and marry, and here is the result. Now, I'm sure, in fact, I'm sure you probably can't see that very well, but now I Because I've already added salt to it, I probably won't, but I will add a little grind of pepper. And these are fork tender and ready for us to have as a side dish with our dinner. It's going to be all about radishes today for dinner. So, okay, so that's dish number one. These are the ones that I boiled in the pot, and it took about maybe 7 minutes or so, not very long, because they're cut in half and they're not as dense as a potato, so it doesn't take as long. Now I've just pulled these out of the oven, and because I didn't use a mandolin or some other method of making sure that these were even, I have some that I had cut really thin that are now tender, really. they're way overcooked, and there are some on here that are still not very chip-like. But then there are the ones that definitely are, and they've come out nice and roasted. And they are delicious. Nobody would be able to, you'd have to tell people that this is a radish. They would not know otherwise. I'm almost tempted to try these in my dehydrator. That might be something coming up. So I'm going to pick through these. I'm going to take off the ones that are overcooked. And, pardon me. So I'm going to pick through these. I'm going to take out the ones that are overcooked. And now I'm going to keep a really close eye on them. I put them in originally for 15 minutes. And then I added another 5 minutes without removing the ones that looked like they were ready, which was my mistake. I hope that you enjoy this. This is recipe number 2. Now last but certainly not least is the roasted version of our cooked radishes. I've just taken them from the oven, so they're still hot. You could see probably the importance here of having them all a similar size, because some of them are almost overcooked and quite dark, while other ones that are a little bigger are just about perfect fork tender. So that's an important thing to remember. But however you want to cook your radishes, don't be afraid to cook your radishes, because they certainly are absolutely wonderful. I'd like to describe the flavor of them. The texture is certainly not like a potato, which is creamier, I would say. These maintain their texture a little better. They do not taste like a turnip. They do not taste like a radish. So it's an interesting mix. So here I have the 3 different ways that I prepared radishes for you today. And while I was doing a little bit of research to see how many other ways you could do radishes, because there's lots, I also discovered a fellow who has been doing some testing with different vegetables. I believe it's for a keto diet, and he's actually using them to make like a mock potato fritter, and it looked quite interesting. So if I can find the link to his YouTube channel, I will put it in the description box below. But in the meantime, I hope that you will maybe step outside your comfort zone if you haven't, and give these a go. Now I think that, maybe not the chips, but definitely the roasted vegetables, or these ones that we sauteed in the pot, could be added to a salad once they've cooled. And I bet they would be quite delightful like that. So there's more than one way to use a radish in a salad. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed coming along with me today. I apologize for all the background noise. I'm living real life here, so it happens sometimes. And anyway, I hope that you've enjoyed coming along with me today, and that if you have, that you will like this video, you'll share it with your friends, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. I would appreciate that very much. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.